Hello, thank you for tuning in to this conversation with Daniel and Javier. This is actually a recording of after a conversation that we had with Mr. Rose, the last video I uploaded called Anxieties Reversal. So Mr. Rose had to leave, and we just stayed on and talked, and at some point I just hit the record button, and so this is about the last hour, essentially a 6-hour conversation that we had. So but there's, like, I thought, a lot of really interesting things that we ended up discussing, so I'm going to go ahead and upload the video and let it stand on its own. So there's a lot to do with the depth of Platonism and the sense in which, in some ways, how all life in some way is pointed at something, you could say, beyond itself. I'd say that most of this conversation was about, in some way, getting close to that intimacy in which we are always, in some sense, in a disposition towards something beyond ourselves. And you could feel in the conversation us starting to circle around what that was, how that is, how it constituted itself. And funny enough, through Daniel's experience of recently having some surgery on his leg, watching his leg kind of reconstitute itself in terms of the form of his whole leg, right? And kind of the symbolism and, well, also technically the literalism of the implications of that. So I hope you really enjoyed the conversation. Some housekeeping. If you are interested in exploring circling, which we talked a bit about, I think, in this video, we have open events on Thursday nights. We have a weekend coming up in about a month, and we also have the year-long training program, which is a deep dive into everything that it is to learn how to facilitate and to practice circling in a very, very intense way. All right, and I also do one-on-one coaching. So my email and all the links for that are below. Enjoy. Thank you. Very cool.
So you have the flagrancy, right? And Plato later wanted to safeguard that flagrancy with the idea. In a sense, you have one pen, and then you have some other pens, and there's a kind of, like, the pen is doing what it should do.
Yeah.
It's writing, right? And in that sense, we can say, and all pens are doing that. Yeah. So they share a kind of structural function organization, which actually works. We could say that then there's an idea of a pen. And that idea of that accomplished being, or that accomplished essence of the pen, is in some sense also, that's then constituting the flagrancy of the pen.
Yeah.
And the flagrancy of all things.
Yeah.
So the flagrancy of all ideas, that's in the idea of the good.
Yeah.
What I wanted to say with the divine double is that this invisible idea is always flagrant. That means we are always attracted to it. There's an eros to it, in a sense.
Yeah.
That it comes virtue and aspiration come into play.
Right.
And we always want to actually accomplish beings, because then again the good shows itself, and also beauty and excellence show themselves, and that's somewhere the flagrancy again comes and sense of.
Totally.
And that's what Heidegger talks about, the shepherding of beings.
Right.
So man is that our thinking, he talks about somewhere, right? Thinking should accomplish beings.
Huh.
Which means vollbringen, fulfilling beings.
Yeah.
That's what thinking in the stance of releasement, other topic, but could achieve.
Yeah.
And again, when I just think about my body, how it's always self-organizing, right?
Yeah.
But towards what?
Yeah.
Wait, say that again. Thoughts what?
Towards what?
Oh, towards what?
There's always, right? Even when you have self-organization, towards what are they? Towards what are
/B.
we
/B.
and that's exactly what I'm always stuck on, because I think I forgot who I read, but they gave a humorous analogy on this. They go, you can look at every object and go, okay, this is what it's supposed to do, right? But just imagine lifting up a baby and go, tell me, what are you supposed to do? What are you supposed to do? What is your use? What is your goal? Tell me. I want to know, what is your use? What is your function? And oftentimes I raise myself like a child dangling by the legs. I'm going, what is my function? I don't understand. What is my function? I don't get it.
And there's where the idea of the divine double becomes important, because right, we have a kind of, there is this normative thing in the future that's normatively guiding us, which is invisible, it's in a sense ideal, it's already accomplished in a very weird way, but it needs us, that we are doing the actual accomplishment in our existence, in our lived finite existence, so we can aspire towards that infinite, already accomplished divine double.
Yeah. This is so just a couple of things. So this kind of thing about this, that I'm glad that you said that. It's flagrant.
And it's flagrant.
Right? We're always attracted to it, right? So it'll look out at us. It's the look. That's that.
It's in a sense, yeah. It's the manhood in man, or it's the treehood in the tree. It's that more.
Yes.
Which we can never really talk about. It's that more, that which flagrantly announces itself.
Yeah.
Wanting to be heeded by man.
Yeah. Yes. And so your leg, that's your leg. What's it? So it's like it's structural function. It's logos. Basically, what you're talking about is it's activating its logos, right? It's structural functional organization, right? Is reconstituting itself, right? Yeah. And you're asking, what for? For the sake of what? Is that what you're saying? Like, how does it know to do that?
Exactly. How does a tree know how to form as a tree?
Yeah.
And this right, we're talking about forms, right? There seems to be an idea of a perfect tree, and all trees seem to want to. And if that form is accomplished, it's flagrant.
Yes.
It provides you with sense.
Totally.
And that's then when we have meaning at these things. That's why we have people who are gardeners, who try to make trees or plants as perfect as they can possibly be. Because we have this shepherding role.
Yeah. Well, let's listen to this question for a second. I just want to listen to this question for a second. So it's like, so let's ask this question. So what does the wound, what does the leg, right? What does it understand in it reconstituting itself? Right? Because we can go, it's interesting because we can ask it, well, why does it do that? Right? But we can also ask, it's like, what does it understand? in doing that. In fact, this is the best way to, I've noticed, like, if you want to understand why you feel what you feel, or what, because, most of the time you ask somebody why they're feeling what they're feeling, you don't, like, they're just kind of talking out of their ass. I am like, why are you sad, guy? I'm like, oh, I'll, I'll, I really don't know why I'm sad. But if you ask me, like, what does the sadness understand? It seems to evoke something. It seems to evoke a different intelligibility, because it's like, it seems to presuppose that the sadness is already is addressing and being addressed. That addressing being addressed seems to be this fundamental relationship that has something to do with how the leg knows to continually self-organize, right? That it's responsive to responding to something, right? And I think what you're saying is like that your third leg, your divine leg. I'm not going to make penis jokes here. Is that the Platonic idea? Is that understanding Plato correctly?
Well, it has a reason to gather, doesn't it? I mean, it's gathering itself towards something for some reason. Otherwise, my wound would never want to accomplish such a reconstitution in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something that I never quite understand. And I did this talk before where I said, there's body beliefs and then there's something that I believe. And oftentimes that they both contradict each other, because my body does something really strange where it's like, I want to go on, but then my body's like, no, you're too tired, my friend. you need to rest. Right? So
yeah, totally.
It tells you something, but you don't even know what it's saying. But the point is, you're supposed to live within it. That live within that gathering body that you have.
Yeah. See, I'm wondering if this is where, like, so on one level, it's like I almost said possibility, right? Like, but then I, now that I have my training, I'm like, no, not possibility, likelihood. Mugen something or other.
Möglichkeit.
Yeah. So it's on some level like, well, is your question, what makes my leg demonstrate this likelihood?
Also, what makes my leg conform to the ideal constitution of my leg? There's this, and that's, you can again see this in all beings. There's a kind of like an ideal form of all particular beings.
Yeah.
That's what Plato tried to safeguard, what he had seen in the phenomena.
Yes.
Showing themselves, because when beings are kind of like in their accomplishment, they are also flagrant.
Yeah.
They have sense and meaning.
Yeah.
And that experience was so wonderful, awe-inspiring, that the Greeks wanted to safeguard that.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing why we have philosophy.
Yeah.
that flagrancy is the fault.
Yeah. It's so interesting because it's also concealed, right? It's see, this is where I think I don't think Heidegger rips on Plato. I think he rips on what Plato made possible. Because I don't think Plato, I never get the sense that Plato's talking about a Platonic realm that's out in heaven. He's talking about the thing happening in your leg.
The Gennaro says the same thing. Like that reading of Plato is bogus.
Yeah.
He says in one of the interviews with Johannes, you should read Plato very hands-on.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is this more going on, which we
Yeah.
can't really explain, but you have sense and all these things, and you have something like that is intelligible, and meaningful.
Yeah.
And even you can really wonder about that. Why is my leg doing that? And then you can start 2,000 years of medical science, just acquiring the body. But I will also say we have to read that not in this detached form, but in a very hands-on manner.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's in the guts. It's in the guts. Yeah. And it also withdrawals, right? It's withdrawals, and that's what makes the wonder, right? But it's also in some sense, I'm wondering about, it's the very part of the very reach back toward it itself, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the clearing. That's this, right? That's this presupposition that Johannes was talking about. That I can even intelligibly inquire that activity that is going on in my leg right now.
Yeah.
That self-organized, right? That structural, functional
organization.
Yeah. That's and that it's self-structuring itself again.
Yeah.
So that's a clearing. So that I can actually look at that and inquire it.
Yeah.
And it's not that that's this thing with Ereignis. It's always this and owning, right? And that's how it's translated.
And don't listen to your leg.
Right, beings show themselves to us, so we can show themselves as what they are, and so we can inquire them.
Yeah.
And why we forget about that? That's this forgetfulness of being, when you don't attune yourself to that actual wonder, but think about whatever else, your fantasies or your desires.
It kind of reminds me, because and when we talk about the leg sort of reconstituting itself, healing, right? When we say something that's healing, right? When it finally reaches its healed state, right? It's this moment of flagrance, isn't it? You're like, oh my, like I'm healed, But then you forget, right? But then it no longer matters that you become healed until another wound opens, that you again pay attention to the reconstitution of itself, right? It jabs you back into your very existence, and again you go through the cycle of I almost want to say, like, in the midst of reconstituting, that is when I feel most alive, just because I am in the middle of my being and remembering, and then finally when I reach that state of completeness, there is this releasement, a fragrant, this exuding thing, and then I forget. In a more common day example.
It's so interesting, because the forgetfulness, if we think about forgetfulness as withdrawal, right, as concealment, because in some way we can also ask this way in which we're gathering around something right now, like, and it's precisely in that we're gathering around something that part of it, that withdrawals, that allows us to gather, right? So it's even happening here. I took a step back and I'm like, oh God, we've been fucking going since what, 9? Like, it's like noon now. I was like, what are we? Oh yeah, something's happening, but it disappeared so that it could happen, right? That thing, right? is really, it's an important, that's an important part of it, I think. See, in some sense, I'm wondering about is that thing, if the way it goes background so that it can be like this, is the same thing that your leg's doing. It's like, it's just, what the, okay, fucking, all right, get me another cell over here, move all this stuff, right? But it, in some level, it's remembering that it's a beautiful leg, and therefore we should put everything into it. Is it's present in its functionality, but it's not present in its, what is it? It's cognitive, I don't know. It's not all in front of it, right? It's enacting it. But the idea, if we say the idea of the leg, right, the Platonic form of the leg, I lost it.
I just want to say one thing. What's so cool is, I think,
I need your new metaphysics.
Is
you hurry up and work that out.
What's so cool is, right? In East Asia, they hate it when you bring something perfect to the table, because the idea, right? That's the idea. That's not how the reality works.
Yeah.
Real things are always, they have wounds, they're finite, they're imperfect.
Yeah.
So there's a story from a Zen master. So like he got the most perfect bowl.
Yeah.
Really perfect. And then he just took it and said, no, that's not a
yes. God damn it.
And he had thrown it to the ground and it just shattered. Yeah. And then there's this in East Asian aesthetics, they often write, you repair broken things. And it's often in their wounds where that is which make them really beautiful in a sense. Because no one of us is like ideal in that sense. It's like is perfectly accomplished, and for good reason, because that's what Daniel said before, right? If we would be perfectly accomplished, then there's nothing to do.
Yeah.
Then we're just divine and godlike and have no limit, and it would be boring very, very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But again, there's this movement of almost showing or self-structuring. There's this aspiration going on, right? Always this gathering together towards something that seems to be ideal and flagrant.
Yeah.
But then why Heidegger perhaps didn't like Plato, because if we really take that idea seriously, then there's this gap between what's real here and ideal there, and we always have to fill that gap, and it's easy that we fill it with nihilism.
Yeah.
that gap is where nihilism can come through.
Yeah. Because is it if we take into account here, okay, so in some sense this is this question is the horizontal. There's those two understandings that where the turn happens, right? Like with Heidegger, between being and time and the contributions, right? Where this being historical thinking, right? Before that, it's a transcendental horizontal something or other, right? This is, and I don't know if I still don't know if I fucking understand what Heidegger means by history. Being historical thinking. but I think it's this, right? I think in some level, it's trying to basically show or say, well, it's trying to speak the nothing, right? But like, but in some level it's okay. So what is a, so if your wound happened in contributions, how would you describe it? I'll put it like that.
Oh my God. Can I even answer that? No.
I think it's the same. It's almost similar to the question of like, what is the divine double? From the divine double's perspective, who are you? Same thing.
I/we. I/we.
Heidegger was I think, I mean, perhaps I shouldn't talk, but but I think Heidegger was also up for this phenomenon of flagrancy.
Yeah.
Because just how beings show themselves is very different. Has always been very different. How reality shows itself, that has always been very different over the course of history. Let's say. The end of philosophy is reached then when beings just don't show themselves at all anymore.
Yeah.
Then we don't, when they have completely withdrawn, when we have kind of like completely given in to the shadows in the cave,
Yeah.
then we also don't need philosophy anymore.
Yeah.
Because then philosophy is the knowledge of the way out. But if we have been completely absorbed by the shadows, then we also don't need, then it's the end of philosophy.
Right.
So again, this saving the phenomena, safeguarding them, and that flagrancy, right? And Heidegger tried first to do that, right, in just by the like not establishing, just examining this horizon and being in time, just really at the what is most at hand, so to say.
Yeah.
And then with Agnes, with the contributions, it's kind of like,
yeah.
I mean, I have this introductory book, and the author, who was the private secretary of Heidegger, he talks about Blickbahn, like alley of looking, so to say. So the first alley of looking was, so to say, into that horizon.
Yeah.
And then the second alley of looking was, so to say, onto that thing we call event or an owning.
Yeah.
Which is this clearing, concealing, openness.
An owning event, that's a right.
Yeah.
Right? That's the translation.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
Which is this clearing, concealing, openness.
Yeah.
That there's this ownness or belonging of man towards being, and that gets examined.
Yeah.
But like the Agnes thinking is too mysterious.
Right.
It's
trying to think clearing itself, right, while still allowing it to be the clearing and not.
Yes. I mean, when you read, for example, that dialogue between the Japanese, between the Inquirer and the Japanese. That's right. That's the name that weird dialogue has. We don't talk about the mystery. It lingers in the background.
I hate that dialogue.
It's the best dialogue.
I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. But they're always this constant exchange of, we can't talk about it. We mustn't say it.
Right. We don't talk about that mysterious presence in the background, which is always unconcealing itself, but yet concealing itself. And
There is so it's very Socratic in that way.
Mm.
Is on some level, the dialogue. The thing I got about reading that or get about that is that there's something going on with that, like in itself, right? It's again, it's like it's kind of like trying to read Plato. You don't want to read the dialogues as Plato presenting his philosophy. The dialogue itself, right, is already it's all part of it, right? So
it's in some sense it's intelligibility becoming intelligible to itself.
Yes.
And as soon, right, Heidegger was so aware of that flagrancy, and also how it's kind of like how it becomes affected when we talk about it, that they rather say, "Oh, we keep silent. We just don't talk. We don't put it into language, because if we make a mistake, then the flagrancy, poof, it's gone."
Yes. Yet he's demonstrating something there, because he's presencing that it's not being said. So there's he's presencing he's concealing and unconcealing concealedness, right? It's like the flagrancy of concealedness just grows through that dialogue, right? Like it's like the thing not being talked about explicitly, you're being careful about, like that thing grows and grows and grows and grows, and by the end of the dialogue, you don't even need to say it, because it's just something is demonstrated about it through the whole thing of not saying it. So in that sense, he's safeguarding it, right, through the whole thing, right? I'm wondering about this. See, this is what's interesting, is like, so then I go, all right, is that the see, that was, I'm glad you bring this up, because I remember that about that. Like, yeah, this is the way, isn't this has something deeply to do with the rightness, right? Because it's like, it's in some sense, it's unconcealing it without unconcealing it. It's allowing it to be present and withdrawal, right, at the same time. It's like all in that sense, it's all deeply here, right? It's not out there. It's not it has its way, but it's all it's more and more present. It abides, right, in this sense, right? So it's, yeah, it is unmetaphysical in that regard, right?
I would even say what is present now, and I would say it's again, when we for example look at the wound and it's how it's self-organizing itself, then we can say, oh, that's a wonder.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
Yeah.
And I don't even want to talk so much about it, because it's so wondrous. Yeah. It's lingering in some sense in the background, just the sheer wonder of that.
Right.
But this happens, let's say, in all natural beings. There's this, even when a child is growing.
Just really quick, that thing that's happening. I don't want to name it right now. Okay, keep going.
That happening, yeah, okay. That happening.
I'm doing the thing.
We know examples, right? When you look at babies growing up, right? What we call nature, that's physis. Yeah. That's then what we later called nature, right?
Yeah.
And then it has become so that when we say nature today, it's so sterile compared to that physis in Greek that's so alive and flagrant, you know. Yeah. And then even in Heidegger and the contribution, not in the contributions, somewhere else in Agnes thinking, that talks about depowering of physis in our age.
Yeah.
And then it has a lot to do with machination and these things, right? Right. So that everything becomes possible, and we can. So then the wonder evaporates.
Yeah. It all works.
Yeah. so what's cool in the perhaps I want to hear also what Javier, because you said you hate the dialogue, and I would like to hear more on that. So what you felt, because that was written in that period we were talking about in Heidegger, and I think it's one of the best because it's so Socratic in how it's written. I think, and that then it gets really so. I always have a chills when I read it.
Yeah.
So I was in a tension when I read that whole dialogue, because it's like, I just want you to tell me, stop beating around the bush. But that's the whole point, right? They're supposed to tell you that there is this bush, but don't touch it, don't say it, don't look at it. And it's funny, as you and Guy were talking about this happening, I kind of had this imagery, because I'm always poetically thinking. I had this imagery of like this tree behind me, right? And I'm in conversation with you three, and then the leaves are growing, and I don't notice it, and then all of a sudden a pear is ripening in the moment, and then all of a sudden it just drops and it hits the ground. I go, what the hell is that? What the hell is that, right? But in this case, it's an invisible tree. And I'm in kind of like this anxiety of like, but what was that? What was that? What was that thing that just dropped? Yeah. But it's always been there. It's always been there.
You hear that sound too?
Growing.
Heidegger, what we could say that dialogue is also it's a dialogical example of releasement enacted, because that's what letting go, right, is all about. And you don't, right, that's what the sentiment that so many Hmong people perhaps have. I want to know, and no, we don't. We let go. Yeah. we let the phenomena show themselves as they are, and we just let that happen.
Yeah.
Without us projecting anything into like trying to forcefully like grasp it, or so we just let it happen. So there's a lecture course from Heidegger where he talks as an introduction to philosophy, which is not translated yet. That was from 1927 to first year students, where he talks about that letting go in a piece of chalk. And he says, before we talk anything about what that chalk is, what its relations are, or what its meaning to us is, we have to just let it abide. So we need to come with a posture, a countenance of letting go, of releasement.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. So we let it be. That's very first thing, and that's why then releasement becomes so important.
Yeah.
Because that very posture then lets the phenomena at first just arise. Even so that then we can even have something.
Trust is so integral into this, isn't it? Trust is so integral into this, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
But there's this irony, because I've had, like I said, I've had trouble letting go, right? So it took this paradox of me realizing that I can't let go, accepting that I can't let go, and then it releases. I let go, right? It's so hard to explain this, because when you're trying to talk to our common day thinking, and you tell someone, well, you need to let go, and they're like, oh, but I can't let go, right? They're like, I don't understand, I can't let go. And then you can say, well, look, accept that you can't let go, right? And then something strange happens. Mm-hmm. The moment I have guided my attention to the fact that I can't let go, it drops. It lets go. It releases. I accept it. I accept that I can't let go. And then I reside in it. I abide in it. And it's beautiful.
Right. Till the next morning.
Yeah. Yes.
That's almost a meta thing, right? It's when that's often when John Wakey talks, you let the framing be, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
And then the framing drops. That's what people in mindfulness meditation do all the time, right?
Yeah. That is what they do all the time. Well, that's at kind of some sense, that's the goal of mindfulness meditation, right? Is that context. Yeah. They're allowing the context, the openness itself to precisely the thing that isn't an object in your awareness to gleam, that gleaming, that shine, that all those simple peasant words, right? Farmer peasant words that he uses. The Evo calls it his poetic senility. Yeah, letting go, letting be. Yeah, it's so rich. It's one of the things that John, he had a really great conversation. I don't know if you guys saw it with that Jewish mystic.
I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah. I like what in the second one where he talked about this difference that he thought that he was disagreement that he thought he had with John. And he's like, oh, maybe I just don't understand where you're coming from with some of these cognitive psychology words, where he's like, I think it was the thing that allows all of this to be is the Jewish mystic was reading into John that it was more cognitive, right? And that
his point was, right, just let me recall it, that things like love it was about love, right?
Yeah.
That love wasn't so present in his lectures.
Yeah.
Or care in a sense.
Yeah.
Although it was more than about just the cognitive structure in a sense. I think that was the point, right?
Right, totally. And what I really liked about this, and I've been thinking about it ever since. And it's so funny. I notice with these things, it's not always what I'm like so struck by during the thing, but these little things that end up that I kind of recognize, but then I find myself like wiggling, like it's a worm going in my mind or something. But this thing he said, it's like, oh yeah, it's like I have it more like, in a mystical perspective, it's more like the whole thing is like it's all okay, it's all well, it's like that's the whole thing, right? Like that's the starting point, that's the end point. It's like it's all well, everything's fine, right? It's good. It's a feeling, sense, knowing, something like that. And I'm just some reason that's coming to mind here, but also that kind of sense of just trust, like God, this has a lot to do with trust, right? To let things show themselves from themselves, right?
I think, right, I mentioned Stephen in one of the conversations we had like a half a year ago. I said a similar thing. I think that when beings show themselves, right, and they want to be spoken by man, they want to be minded by man, that there's a weird thing going on in interrelation, just in between us.
Yeah.
And then right, there's this thing that we call, I don't know, soul, compassion, trust, that kind of like fills the void.
Yeah, totally.
Is that what anxiety is
right,
like?
where ontological flesh may be.
Javier?
I was saying, is that what like anxiety is like? It's like where you all of a sudden you feel the burden of this trust, or the trust that you must give. No, well, to abide in. I think the trust to abide in is that what it is? Maybe that you're not abiding in the trust, so you realize. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know anymore what I'm trying to say. I'm giving Daniel a headache.
you know, there's this, there was this book from the courage to be disliked, and that is from a Japanese psychoanalyst called Kishimi. Anyways, he said it's written in a Socratic dialogue, and it's about Plato and his other great role model, Alfred Adler, like the last in the great three, besides Freud and Jung. And for Alfred Adler, all problems were social in nature. All human problems were social in nature. So he was from all the three, he was the most socially oriented.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you say anxiety, I think right, that trust is it's about social relations, and it's about rather you can't trust anyone, or no one can trust you. There's this junction, right, between you and the others.
Mm-hmm.
So and that's of course like anxiety producing.
Yeah.
But it has a lot, right? It has a lot to do with personhood. And I said this last time, the word personhood comes from personare, which means to sound through. And then when you don't have trust, nothing sounds through. Well, like, right, how you show themselves to the other doesn't really get that doesn't sound through, that doesn't resonate.
Yeah.
And then trust cannot like flourish or grow, or even meaning, flagrancy. These things don't just like poof.
Yeah.
And where do I want to go? It's really then about like showing face, showing what you are.
Yeah.
And often, right. That's again what Guy is often encircling. That when people feel that they themselves in their personhood, just as they are, in their suchness, when that sounds through, then that is so deeply meaningful. And then you have trust and love and compassion, right. and these things suddenly become flagrant, and it's even then in these moments, and I had these moments in these, right? I had this once at a tea ceremony. Mm-hmm. There was a woman, and she suddenly started then crying because she had this feeling that for the first time she was seen just as she is in her suchness, and that in no other context in her normal life she could just sit there and be and make tea. So just this very mundane, simple activity, but she had the feeling that nowhere that sounded through, so to say, her personhood, her more, and that's then right. It fills the room. It's like the room becomes flagrant in this powerful way. And I think that's the phenomenon.
Things get more real. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then that's the phenomenon we are kind of like talking around here. But Adler again, he overcame that by saying the book from the Japanese psychoanalysis was The Courage to be Disliked. So because some people like they bend themselves so much and kind of like they never live authentically. They are so inauthentic all the time that just their suchness never comes through. And he says that's a courage to be disliked. That's a courage to be authentic, which can be very difficult for many people. But that's like the first step, and then because then flagrancy comes in form of trust and love. Then also your social relationships become better almost automatically. That's the theory, so to say.
Yeah, it's really true. That's really true. Like those moments, that moment that you described with her, just see this over and over again, especially if somebody has never had that and then they have it. and they have it in a way such that they can say it and it can be had in a certain sense. That's a game changer. Like that'll change everything. That's one of those things where it's like the world was one way, right? And then that happens, and then it's never ever the same after that. That's whatever's being touched on in those moments. I don't know. They're just so, there's something about that with human beings. I think it's like it's in some sense, there's something about the ontological difference that opens up in that moment, right? It's the breaking open of something. It's the releasement of something. It's all, there's so much going on there. That's so, striking.
This whole talk, it's reminding me of, like, when the breaking, right? Have you seen those bowls where they fill the cracks and the crevices with gold, right? They fill it with gold, and actually,
that's kintsugi. That's what I explained before.
And that's what makes the bowl more beautiful. Not perfect, but it's what makes the bowl more beautiful, and it really stands out, doesn't it? And I think I think what it means, like, to be yourself, like, authentically, is to, like, be that bowl, right? You're finally filling in those crevices and those cracks, and you're saying, this is me. This is who I am.
Yeah.
And nothing can penetrate past this, because I've already filled it with this kind of gold, thing. I don't know, I've filled it with myself.
Yeah.
Finally.
Totally. Hey, you guys. Speaking of cracks and fill and gold, I got some cracks to fill. I gotta get going.
Let's do this. Guy, can you
I've got to figure out where it's coming from.
Yes. Can you end the conversation?
Yes. Oh yeah.